Hello again. Today we're going to be discussing the Lawful Good archetype, and the lens through which we'll be discussing it is the character Rhodes, and more broadly speaking, Atlas itself. Before we get started in earnest, past experience tells me I'll need to front-load this episode with some clarification, so with that in mind... 1. Sympathising with a person or being able to understand their thought process is not the same as justifying, endorsing, or otherwise agreeing with that person. 2. Cinder is an adult, and regardless of her trauma or the manipulation and toxic relationship she has with Salem, she does still need to be seen as responsible for her own decisions. 3. However, you cannot retroactively apply the actions she would take to the child slave she was, or act like that background didn't play a huge role in who she became. 4. Also, no, this is not the same as Adam, because we have no idea what happened to Cinder after she escaped, but we do know that Adam found a safe and supportive environment, one that he ended up ruining for power, and also several of his immoral acts, i.e. his treatment of Blake and other faunas, can't be tied back to his trauma. Okay? Okay. So, a quick reminder. In Volume 8 we found out that as a child Cinder was sold through a human trafficking organisation to a wealthy hotel owner, only known as Madame. Madame kept her as a slave and would often keep Cinder hungry, overworked, and most of all, abused her with an electric shock collar. The wicked stepsisters also gleefully participated in this torment. A huntsman, Rhodes, often frequented this hotel. At 10 years old, Cinder found herself pushed to the brink and stole Rhodes' sword, intent on killing her slavers. Rhodes, however, found her first and informed her that if she did that, she'd spend the rest of her life running. We actually see this make Cinder start tearing up, her seemingly only avenue of escape and relief just being condemnation to another prison. Rhodes notes that she isn't being treated, finger quotes, fairly, and earlier we saw him looking away from Cinder when she was suffering with a guilty expression. He then hits upon perhaps the least helpful way to help Cinder. He takes her interest in the freedom being a huntsman provides as a desire to be a huntress over simply a desire to get out and be free, and proceeds to train her in secret, even arming her. His reasoning being that with his training, once she reaches 17, Cinder will be eligible to enter an academy and her finger quotes guardian won't be able to stop her. This training plan lasts 5 years, with Rhodes tutoring her in secret when he visits her hotel until Cinder is 15 and the weapon he gifted her to fight evil is found by her stepsisters. They race to Madame and seem to relish in the fact that Cinder will soon be punished and trail after their mother to watch the spectacle. Rhodes arrives shortly after and he senses that something is wrong. In the short 10-minute interval leading to midnight, Cinder was found, attacked with intent to harm, and have taken from her the items that represented her escape, and she lashed out. Based on the position of the body as Madame's seeming belief the shock collar will help and the fact no one even seemed to get close to the door, I honestly doubt Cinder took much time with the stepsisters. It looks more like she lashed out and snapped their spines before taking control of the situation and executing Madame by snapping her neck, but not before informing her former owner of how Cinder was nothing, but now because of Madame she is everything. When Rhodes arrives, Cinder addresses him with a cracking voice, seemingly on the verge of tears, but she smiles and says that she doesn't have to run anymore. Rhodes forlornly draws his weapons and informs the deeply traumatized and psychologically fracturing teenager that running is all she will ever do. They fight. Rhodes seems to get the upper hand and stun Cinder, but when he gets close to check on her, she lashes out, striking him in the gut, and an act seemingly that surprised her as much as him. He ends his life patting her head, and we see Cinder rip off her collar and look to the moon with tears on her face. Phew! Okay, that was a lot, but let's focus back on Rhodes here and why I think he's thematically fitting for the Atlas arc and what he's a commentary on in general. Though, fun trivia before we start, I would like to note how much of this was hinted at in previous arcs, like with Cinder's speech in Volume 3, i.e., this is what happens when you hand over your trust, your safety, your children to men who claim to be our guardians, but are in reality nothing more than men. Huntsmen and huntresses should carry themselves with honour and mercy, yet I have witnessed neither. Suffice to say, her background plays into her disdain for hunters and the current order a great deal, however hypocritical that might have become over time. Okay, on to my main thesis. Throughout the Atlas arc, there was a frequent push-pull of doing what was right or upholding the system / acting with, finger quotes, loyalty to Ironwood. This is to be expected in a story where a Robin Hood analogue is in conflict with a powerful authority figure, one who utilises his political and military positions in such a way that harms the poor and minorities while insulating the upper crust from the consequences of his actions. Across the arc, much of what Ironwood did was either technically legal, like his increasingly draconian policies, taking private property, embezzling supplies for a secret project that were desperately needed elsewhere, or arresting people for protesting his decision to leave Mantle to die, or simply adhering said plan. Ironwood has better intentions than Prince John, but ultimately fell into the same role as an authoritarian, one who was supported by the legal and political systems of Atlas and its culture of loyalty and obedience, where actions against the system or the general were crimes regardless of their moral worth. How does this relate to Rhodes? Well, despite the time investment in his last act showing he cared about her, the fact of the matter is he was lawful to a frankly fatal degree. His whole plan revolved around Cinder earning her freedom legally by waiting until she was old enough to simply walk away from her slaver. One could argue that Rhodes had so little faith in the Atlasian system bringing about any justice for Cinder if her situation was revealed that he thought it better to power through more than half a decade of slavery and torturous abuse. But that's still an implicit condemnation of the legal and justice system of Atlas and how it and good people simply cannot do good because it wasn't designed to do good. Frankly though, given he escalated a situation wherein he nor anyone alive was in any danger and cast judgment on Cinder as eternally doomed, that's all you'll ever do. I think Rhodes is someone already who had his goodness co-opted by a system of law that pays lip service to morality but doesn't embody it, because he clearly cares about Cinder, clearly wants to help her, but he never not once risks stepping even a toe out of line of the law that governs him. Even though it means allowing a child to be brutally abused, something he pretty clearly believes is morally wrong, he allows it because he believes in upholding the system and that that's more important than helping someone in need, even someone he clearly cared about. His ideals couldn't support Cinder and the Atlasian legal system, meaning when he left her there and when he chose to start a fight with her over even trying to talk, he was choosing the law over her, the law over what was right, every single time. Did the context matter that Cinder was a child slave who snapped at her abusers after years of slavery and torture? Not enough to stop him from trying to punish her for it. The law protects those who hurt her but is powerless to stop her from being hurt, and thus so is Rhodes, his good intentions little more than delaying the inevitable. After all, isn't it poetic that when they first met she had stolen his sword and then years later it was the sword he gave her that led to this final fateful confrontation? Rhodes, however much he cared, didn't care enough to address the source of Cinder's pain, and as a result he ultimately did no good at all. Also, before we continue, I want to make it clear that there is no way Rhodes didn't know about the shock collar. He trained Cinder for 5 years. If he somehow missed that, he's just too dumb to live. What's more, we see heroic characters be willing to break the laws, challenge the system, and risk imprisonment or death to do what's right throughout the series, and given he was able to keep up the secret training, just how easy it is to disappear on Remnant, and also that slavery is illegal in Atlas, I struggle to see why Rhodes couldn't have done more than operate within the letter of the law. Separate, but also an interesting bit of trivia, the glass unicorn where Cinder was enslaved, explicitly anti-faunus, just not advertised on the front window but subtly on the desk. But let's try and wrap this up, shall we? Ultimately, I think the fact Rhodes determined the murder of one's slavers is a crime one can seemingly never atone for but leaves the slavers to their devices due to legality says a lot about his character. I also think it's rather reflective of Atlas as a whole. Ironwood can take whatever he deems necessary from Mantle, but when Robin reclaims it, she's branded a criminal, and the prospect of using martial law is brought up if capturing and using Robin as a bargaining chip fails. Disruptions to the system must be broken, but the system itself must be upheld no matter what it is doing or why. In the past, I have seen some argue that this is not an example of lawful good because a truly lawful good person would have done something, but I myself think that stance defeats the purpose of the lawful in the good. If they are willing to break the rules and laws for what is right, then they are just neutral good. The lawful aspect is trying to do good within the framework of the law as it is. To put a bow on this one, I once again need to stress that legality will never reflect morality, that words or mandates passed down from positions of authority are not inherently right or righteous. Characters that utilize the law for their own ends or dogmatically obey it will often find themselves clashing with what is righteous and good, or faced with an enemy they never needed to face, but for the grace of honor and mercy. As always, if you'd like to help out with these videos, please feel free to swing by my Patreon or my Ko-fi. There you can do stuff like get early previews of my work or commission 3D models. Thanks for stopping by.